Not scandal, not spotlight. Silence is what shaped Robin Gibb. For years, people thought they understood the Bee Gees through Barry's falsetto or the disco fever of Saturday Night Fever. Yet amid that global frenzy, there was a voice quietly pulling listeners toward hidden corners they didn't even realize existed until it was too late. Robin didn't sing like a man chasing fame. He sang as if he were guarding the secrets of an entire era, a sorrow with no name, a memory that chills the listener even when they can't tell what they're afraid of. I Started a Joke sounded like a prophecy of his own life. Massachusetts felt like footsteps leaving a safe place behind. How Can You Mend a Broken Heart wasn't a question about love. It was Robin's plea to the void that success could never fill. Robin Gibb wasn't just a voice. He was contradiction made flesh. A genius who wrote immortal melodies, yet always felt like an outsider in his own story. An artist, revered worldwide, who lived and died, as though he were trying to avoid attention. His journey reveals more than a Bee Gees legend. It uncovers the story of a man who spent his entire life running from an echo of destiny that had been written into his blood. That silence wasn't born on a stage. It came from a cramped apartment where a blaring fire alarm tore through the night and pushed a young boy into the first escape of his life, long before music ever arrived. Fear became his first companion, even before melody. Robin Hugh Gibb entered the world on December 22, 1949, on the Isle of Man, just 35 minutes before his twin brother Maurice. A gap so small it seemed meaningless, yet enough to imprint a lifelong sense of never truly being separate. A bond he could never outrun. The Gibb family wasn't musical royalty, but in that tiny home, the sound of their father Hugh's drums and their mother Barbara's voice were the first things Robin absorbed before he understood the meaning of any word. Music wasn't a choice. It was the air he was forced to breathe. When Robin was still very young, the family moved to Manchester, where scarcity was the rule, not the exception. The harsh industrial city offered no room for fantasy, yet it forged something raw and potent inside him, a solitude that couldn't find a place to belong, a fear of being swallowed by crowds, the perpetual sensation of living on the fringes of every game. Barry, Robin, and Maurice clung to each other like a life raft, turning to music not for fame, but so they wouldn't forget who they were. In 1958, when the family decided to emigrate to Australia, Robin was only 8. That weeks-long sea voyage didn't just carry them across oceans. It hurled Robin into a world he hadn't been prepared for. It was in this new chapter, on the dusty grounds of Red Cliff Speedway, where engines roared, gasoline stung the air, and the crowd barely glanced at the stage, that Robin learned something essential. Only raw, unfiltered emotion could force people to stop and listen. Those early fragments, a family stitched together by sound, a boy who felt like a shadow in his own home, and a desperate escape from poverty, did not immediately produce a star. They produced a soul wired to tremble, cracked just enough for light to seep through, and a voice that sounded, every time it rose, like it was trying to catch something slipping away. From that moment on, Robin Gibb didn't just learn to perform. He learned to survive through music. And that is what led his life to places even he could never have imagined. That contradiction between a soul that only wanted to tell stories through music and a world demanding he become an icon did not appear out of nowhere. It began the moment Robin understood his voice wasn't meant to showcase technique, but to say the things no one else dared to speak. From a shy boy hiding behind his older brother, he became the emotional core of songs whose impact even the Bee Gees themselves couldn't anticipate. In Australia, where the Gibb family arrived with nothing but hope, music wasn't a dream. It was the only way to breathe. Those performances at Red Cliff Speedway, dust clogging his throat, engines roaring like thunder, were where Robin learned to make his voice cut through chaos. Barry was the writer, Maurice the arranger, and Robin delivered a trembling tone that left listeners feeling as if each line bore the scars of a life already lived. Early singles like The Battle of the Blue and the Gray and Wine and Women didn't launch them to the top, but Australian radio heard something uncanny. A teenage boy singing about loneliness and loss as though he'd spent decades inside them. That vibrato wasn't technique. It was the residue of a fear of being left behind. The difference became even clearer when the family returned to England in 1966. One suitcase of demo tapes, one chance encounter, and suddenly Robin was standing before Robert Stigwood, the man who held the keys to British pop at the time. Just weeks later, the Bee Gees were recording for Polydor, and the moment New York mining disaster 1941 hit the airwaves, the whole country thought it was the Beatles. It wasn't a quirky mistake. It was a declaration. Something new was coming, something that didn't belong to any category. From that point on, Robin's voice was no longer background. It became the Bee Gees' emotional nucleus. Massachusetts shot to #1. A ballad that felt like a farewell to home. I've Got to Get a Message to You turned a final plea into a radio anthem. I started a joke, laid down a prophecy that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Robin didn't chase the spotlight. He dragged listeners into the darkness, where emotions had nowhere to hide. Success came so fast, Robin never had time to ask if he even wanted it. At 18, a boy who had just escaped the dust of an Australian racetrack became the new face of British pop. The pressure was suffocating, and Robin began to fear something far worse than failure: success. Success that devoured him faster than fame could ever repay. That rapid ascent didn't just bring glory, it planted a dangerous question: who was the true soul of the Bee Gees? When the label chose Barry's 1st of May as the single instead of Lamplight, the song Robin believed held the album's heart, every insecurity inside him ignited. To outsiders, it was a marketing decision. To Robin, it was a brutal message. The emotions he poured into their music, the very thing that hurt to sing, were no longer valued. In 1969, at the height of it all, Robin left. No scandal, no tantrum, just an artist so wounded, he believed that if he didn't separate from his own blood, he would disappear inside the very band he helped build. His solo single, Saved by the Bell, climbed to #2 in the UK, proof he could stand alone. The album Robin's Reign unveiled a private universe, abstract, icy, like memories frozen mid-breath. It was successful enough to validate his gift, but missing the one thing that made the Bee Gees irreplaceable: the breath of family. In the quiet after the spotlight, Robin learned a truth fame never teaches. Going solo gave him freedom, but freedom came paired with a cost: loneliness. Without Barry's harmonies or the invisible framework Maurice always created, Robin's voice, no matter how beautiful, felt like it was echoing inside a room without walls, resonant, but with nowhere to land. That realization is what brought the brothers back together. No grand apologies, just a look. The way they regarded one another in the studio as they wrote Lonely Days, and especially How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? The Bee Gees' first U.S. #1. It wasn't just a hit. It was a confession from 3 men who nearly let ego destroy the very music that had held them together since childhood. And Robin, though he never said it aloud, understood something profound. Some sorrows only become music when sung by 3 voices, not one. The reunion brought the brothers back to the studio, But it did not return Robin to his old place. As the Bee Gees shifted direction, what happened resembled a kind of musical plastic surgery. Barry became the new face of the band, while Robin, the former soul of their sorrow-soaked ballads, turned into an underground current, unseen yet indispensable. When Barry's falsetto soared over the disco riffs sculpted by Arif Mardin, the Bee Gees' sound shed its old skin. To most listeners, it was an explosion. Music that made bodies want to move. To Robin, it was a silent knife cutting into his artistic identity. He who once dragged the world into the Bee Gees' shadowed emotional depths now had to stand behind the blaze of light erupting in front of him. But Robin did not abandon the game. He chose instead to exist like an invisible gravitational force. His interlaced lines softened melodies, his harmonies opened emotional doors, and his tremulous phrases pulled listeners out of their disco intoxication and back into the silent terror within themselves. Not the spotlight, but a psychological undertow. No one but Robin could perform that role. The strange thing about Robin was that his inner conflict never turned destructive. It became a dark, smoldering energy that pushed the Bee Gees forward. He understood that disco could devour everything, including identity, so he embedded trembling notes and hidden tensions into its pulse. While people lost themselves in the bass line of jive talkin', Robin slipped harmonies into the song that made it more than dance music. It made it unsettling, as if joy always stood on the edge of a precipice. Robin accepted the background, but he never surrendered the band's soul. At a time when the world was sprinting toward glittering disco lights, he became the keeper of what the Bee Gees feared losing most: emotion. If Barry was the voice that cut through time and Maurice the architect who held structure together, then Robin was the ghost haunting their hits. A reminder that Bee Gees' music wasn't made just to entertain, but to survive. This shift in roles, turning Robin into the contemplative undertone behind Barry's falsetto, turned out to be the missing piece for the greatest explosion in Bee Gees' history. The turning point came in 1975, when Main Course marked the group's rebirth in Miami, pushing Barry into falsetto territory and thrusting the Bee Gees into R&B disco territory. While the public believed the Gibb brothers had found a golden key, Robin understood something sharper. This was no longer music to sing. It was music to endure. And that survival instinct created the irreversible split between pre-disco Bee Gees and post-disco Bee Gees. By late 1976, Robert Stigwood brought them a script about Brooklyn youths obsessed with dancing and desperate for escape. The project that became Saturday Night Fever, released late 1977. The Gibbs weren't just handed a soundtrack contract. They were offered a chance to rewrite the DNA of popular culture. Every wound, every ambition, every fear of obsolescence after their early 70s slump was packed into a 5-day songwriting marathon at Criteria Studios. Robin wasn't singing for attention. He was binding the Bee Gees' soul into every arrangement, a kind of spiritual labor only someone who never wanted to be seen could complete. In Stayin' Alive, finished early 1977, beneath the relentless bass and the kick drum pounding like footsteps on New York pavement, Robin's voice seeped in like a gray thread through neon, turning what sounded like an anthem of immortality into something steeped in the doubt of someone who didn't believe he'd live long enough to enjoy it. Night Fever, March 1978, seemed like pure disco fever. But when Robin lifted the harmony and crushed it at the end of the line, the song became a delirious blur of pleasure and displacement, the emotional state only those lost inside success can understand. How Deep Is Your Love was a symphony of silent language. Barry led the melody, but Robin wove into it a quiet sadness, thin enough to comfort, deep enough to haunt anyone who met tears without knowing why. When the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack dropped in late November 1977, what followed was not success. It was social upheaval. The album sold more than 40 million copies and became one of the best-selling soundtracks in history. The Bee Gees sat atop Billboard, as if the charts existed solely for them. But behind the magazine's smiles, inside the machine, was Robin, a man who had helped define the Bee Gees' essence, yet was silently terrified he no longer recognized himself in its glow. Flights blurred into time zones. Miami nights, Los Angeles mornings, New York afternoons, Europe by dusk. Contracts, interviews, new albums, new hits, everything piled onto the shoulders of a man so sensitive that even praise could make him question himself. Each night felt like someone dragging him back into the studio, scrutinizing every breath, every accent, as if one wrong note could send the Bee Gees crashing from the sky. The public saw the Bee Gees, disco gods, but never the figure shrinking inside the harmonies he himself created. And at the peak of those blinding lights, Robin faced the bitterest paradox. The greater the fame, the smaller he became. The Bee Gees conquered the world, while Robin, the phantom soul behind someone else's voice, lost himself in a triumph he had helped build with his own hands. The greater the glory, the harsher the price. When the Bee Gees stood atop the world with Saturday Night Fever, none of them imagined that less than 3 years later, that very triumph would become a public indictment. The melodies that once made the world dance were now being treated as a cultural catastrophe. In the late 1970s, America plunged into economic recession, post-Vietnam disillusionment, fractured political trust, racial tensions flared, and disco, born from Black, Latin, and LGBTQ+ communities, was branded as non-traditional, a threat to white middle-class values. And when society went hunting for a scapegoat, the Bee Gees happened to be standing exactly where the blow would land. The Disco Sucks movement spread like an ideological plague. Its apex came with Disco Demolition Night, July 12, 1979, at Comiskey Park, where the crowd didn't just burn records, they performed a ritualistic purge. The screams, the hurling discs, the smoke rising like a battlefield. It was as if the public were avenging themselves on a traitor, not on harmless vinyl. This was no longer about music. It was a declaration of war on everything disco stood for: difference, freedom, and the audacious dream that anyone could shine. The Bee Gees became the prime targets. Radio stations dropped them en masse. TV shows erased their names from playlists. DJs received unofficial directives: don't let them come back. The press called them the mummified remains of a dead trend, though just seasons earlier, those same voices had crowned the brothers as architects of a generation. For Robin, who once sang as if every lyric were a lifeline pulling him away from abandonment, the fall felt like being hurled back into the very darkness he had feared his whole life, the void of not belonging. Desperate to escape the disco sentence, the Bee Gees released Living Eyes, 1981, a refined pop-rock album full of introspection, nearly devoid of disco's traces. But the public wasn't interested in evolution. They simply wanted to forget the Bee Gees had ever existed. The album was strong, but prejudice was stronger. No one cared to listen to three men trying to say they were more than falsetto and dance floors. Robin, instead of drowning in that backlash, found his own exit. His solo record, How Old Are You, 1983, and the hit Boys Do Fall in Love proved he was not some spare shadow beside Barry. The moderate success helped reclaim the artistic identity the disco storm had tried to erase. Behind the scenes, the brothers wrote hits for Barbra Streisand, Diana Ross, Dionne Warwick, Kenny Rogers, songs that topped charts without their names attached. turning Robin into an anonymous brain powering mainstream music. A paradox, omnipresent yet invisible. By the 1990s, the public fury dissipated, replaced by sober reflection. Critics were forced to acknowledge a truth they had long resisted. The Bee Gees were formidable songwriters, not opportunists hitching a ride on a trend. The songs once dismissed as disposable now outlived those who wanted them buried. No one proclaimed the Bee Gees forgiven. The shift happened quietly, the way Robin always sang, without noise, without justification. In 1997, when the Bee Gees were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, people suddenly realized they were honoring the same band they had once tried to erase. No speech reversed history. Time and numbers had already done the work. The very music mocked as shallow now endured longer than the jeers demanding its extinction. In 2002, the CBE medal from the British Crown landed in the brothers' hands, not as a victory trophy, but as an institutional admission of what the public once denied. The Bee Gees were not products of disco. Disco was something that had to chase them. Robin stood in those moments with a face that revealed nothing, neither triumph nor sorrow, like a man watching a cycle he'd always known would come. Crowds may change their minds, trends may flare and fade, but music written from real wounds never needs a defense. Robin did not seek vindication. Time simply put him in a place history had not been ready to grant him. His redemption wasn't spotlight, it was longevity of memory. The era of hatred revealed his true nature. Robin was never part of disco's glittering surface. He was the one who saw the sadness hidden beneath it. People assumed he belonged to a dance floor generation. They never realized he belonged to the moments when humans need someone to articulate the loneliness they dare not face. That belated recognition didn't make Robin shine any brighter. It merely prolonged a paradox he had lived with since youth. The whole world eventually heard him. Yet no one ever truly saw him. And it was in those quiet spaces between the lights of fame that Robin stepped into a private story no stage could illuminate. A relationship that began as weightless as breath, then gradually grew as heavy as the songs he wrote. He met Molly Hullis while the Bee Gees were becoming Britain's newest sensation. Molly didn't come from the whirlwind of spotlights, but from backstage, working within Robert Stigwood's team, where schedules, negotiations, and commercial strategies unfolded silently behind applause. To Robin, that calm was magnetic. Molly didn't view him as a star, but as a man with empty rooms inside him waiting to be filled. In long work sessions and conversations that stretched beyond recording hours, Robin felt for the first time that someone recognized the fragility behind his distant gaze. Love arrived like an escape route. Molly felt like home, not a refuge from fame's storm, but a place where Robin believed he could finally shed the armor of an artist perpetually burdened by expectation. In 1968, they married. The wedding photo, Robin with a faint smile, convinced the public he was entering a happy new chapter. Only those close to him noticed the vulnerability in his eyes, as if he feared happiness was something destined to slip from his grasp. Their children, Spencer and Melissa, were born with the promise that fatherhood might anchor Robin in reality rather than let him drift through the emotional landscapes he continually sculpted into music. But just when he needed stability most, the Bee Gees were launched into global orbit. Endless tours from continent to continent, sleepless studio sessions, the relentless pressure to produce another hit. These turned Robin into a guest passing through his own home. Molly tried to stay on his side, but love cannot survive a rival more insidious than fame. The insecurity rooted deep inside Robin's soul. He loved Molly, loved his children, yet felt perpetually on the verge of losing them, just as he had once lost himself inside his own voice. Molly watched the man adored by millions tremble in the heart of his own family. The tighter she held him, the more she felt her hands closing around nothing. Conversations dwindled. From silent dinners to days when Robin disappeared into the studio without warning, their marriage didn't break from betrayal. It decayed under silence. Molly suffered as she realized she was competing with something Robin never controlled: music, and the sorrow that made him who he was. Robin felt guilty for failing to be the man she needed, yet powerless to detach himself from the thing that kept him alive. In 1980, the marriage ended. Molly didn't leave in anger, but in exhaustion. She could no longer love a man whose body was present, but whose soul hovered somewhere between the stage and the shadows. Robin watched his family walk away like someone standing inside a house, hearing the door close, knowing he couldn't catch up, yet not knowing how to stay. That relationship left a fracture in Robin that never healed. The man who made the world cry through his music could not keep the tears of his own home from slipping away. The ballads he wrote afterward only grew more sorrowful, as though every note was an apology he never managed to speak aloud. When Molly left, Robin didn't rush into a new romance. He entered the 1980s like a man adrift between two selves, an artist finally recognized by history, and a man who no longer knew where to place his heart. In that seemingly empty stretch of time, Robin met Dwina Murphy, and his life veered onto a path that no one, not even those who understood him best, could have predicted. Dwina was unlike any woman Robin had ever known. She was a poet, a visual artist, and a follower of Druidic philosophy. Someone who lived at the crossroads of art, spirituality, and nature, as if those three forces had always been intertwined. If Molly represented the stability Robin longed for but could not hold, then Dwina offered a world where strangeness wasn't judged, where sorrow, obsession, and psychological shadows weren't flaws to be hidden, but raw material for creation. They met in the early 1980s at an art event. Robin was drawn to the way Dwina looked at him without seeing the BG. Not the voice, not the fame, but the man behind the harmonies that made the world tremble. Dwina didn't fall in love with the melodies he composed. She was captivated by the wound that compelled him to write them. Love arrived slowly, without spectacle. Like two people discovering they spoke the same language no one else could decipher. If with Molly, Robin had tried to become a normal version of himself, then with Dwina, he could let the oddities in his mind roam freely. That both saved him and ensnared him because Robin feared that happiness was an illusion that would vanish if he dared to touch it too firmly. They married in 1985. A year later, their son, Robin John Gibb, was born. Holding the child, Robin felt something he had never been able to grasp with Spencer and Melissa. A fatherhood not fractured by touring schedules, media scrutiny, or the insecurities gnawing at his core. Dwina taught him to see family as a process, not a ready-made gift, but something built through time and presence. But no love ever entered Robin's life without complication. Dwina was deeply introspective, spiritually rooted, and at times too distant from the volatile reality of show business. Their home overflowed with books, instruments, and druidic rituals, sometimes turning into a fortress against the outside world, and also a sanctuary where Robin hid from the burden of his own existence. There were periods when he withdrew for weeks, composing as if each melody were the only exit door he had left. Dwina never reproached him, but her patience sometimes enabled Robin to dig deeper into the sadness he should have been trying to escape. Even so, this relationship did not collapse. Dwina didn't try to heal Robin, nor did she attempt to change him. She stood beside him as a witness, not loving the man he was expected to be, but loving the man he already was. That lack of expectation gave Robin something he had never known before, a place to return to without needing to sing to be accepted. If Robin's first love ended in silence, then his love with Dwina survived on an understanding beyond words. She didn't fill the emptiness in him. No one could. But she was the only person who made that emptiness less terrifying. Not every artist is fortunate enough to find someone patient enough to walk through the entire journey with them. Robin Gibb did. And sometimes, that matters more than a world rising to its feet in applause. Though Robin had finally found a place where his heart could rest, he never escaped the invisible thread tying him to the Gibb family, where love, genius, and tragedy intertwined like a destiny no one could resist. Everything in his life, whether on stage or off, traced back to that first harmony beside his brothers, especially Maurice Gibb. If Barry was the flame of ambition, then Maurice was the grounding pulse Robin leaned on to keep from breaking. Maurice wasn't his twin in biology, but in spirit, the only one who understood Robin's sudden panics, emotional whirlpools, and the cycles of dark introspection that governed him. Whenever Robin retreated into those private shadows, drowning in silence or substances to cope with fame's pressure, Maurice was the one who pulled him back to earth. Amid Robin and Barry's endless clashes over artistic direction or spotlight, Maurice was the glue holding the Bee Gees together long after fate should have torn them apart. Robin could destroy everything with emotion, but only Maurice knew how to get him to sit down, breathe, and begin again. Destiny began cutting those threads one by one when death started knocking on the Gibb household door. In 1988, the youngest brother, Andy Gibb, the baby Robin once carried in his arms, the voice that seemed destined to surpass even the Bee Gees, died at 30 from myocarditis, the final consequence of years spent battling cocaine and fame that arrived too fast. Andy embodied Robin's deepest fear. Talent wasn't a gift, but a trapdoor into oblivion unless someone strong enough held you back from the edge. Robin stood beside Andy's coffin as though he were watching the burial of his own youth, a pain he never stopped carrying. In 1992, Hugh Gibb, the family's first drummer, died. To outsiders, it was merely the passing of an old man. To Robin, it was the moment the house where melodies were born lost its foundation. Hugh had once played dingy hotel gigs to feed a brood of children chasing music. When he died, Robin didn't just lose a father. He felt the very heartbeat that kept the Bee Gees' world upright disappear. Each loss carved a chilling understanding. The Bee Gees weren't a story of success. They were a story of fragile souls forced to sing so they wouldn't fall apart. Robin began to realize that every hit they created cost them something. Health, sanity, sometimes life itself. The higher their fame rose, the longer the shadows over the family stretched. And Robin, more than anyone, knew he was living in glory built upon holes no one could ever fill. Historical vindication didn't bring Robin peace. It only sharpened his awareness that time was tightening around every cell in his body. Career, family, musical rebirths, they all seemed held together by a single fragile thread. And Robin lived with the constant fear that thread could snap at any moment. At this point, his story entered its final chapter. Instead of battling fame, Robin faced an enemy he could not turn into a song, his own body. For years, stomach pains stalked him, persistent as fate tapping at the door. Robin avoided hospitals not out of arrogance, but because he sensed his body carried a family curse. The Gibbs had a bad gut history, conditions no one fully understood, only recognized when they arrived like a blade through life. After Maurice's shocking death in 2003 from intestinal blockage, that shadow grew darker. Maurice had been robust, joyful, electric, yet a single abdominal pain stole him in an instant. Robin didn't just lose the only peacemaker between him and Barry, he lost the anchor who guided him whenever life turned cold. From that day on, every pain in Robin's stomach felt like a countdown he could hear but not stop. In 2010, that warning stopped being abstract. While preparing for a performance in Belgium, Robin collapsed from unbearable abdominal pain. The show was canceled, the audience confused, and Robin was rushed to Oxford for emergency treatment. The diagnosis cut through him like déjà vu. A severe intestinal blockage, the very condition that killed Maurice. Doctors operated frantically. Robin survived, but what he lost wasn't strength. It was the illusion that he could outrun genetics. Strangely, instead of withdrawing like a man burdened by illness, Robin moved faster, worked harder, composed more, as if he owed time a debt he could never repay. He threw himself into the Titanic Requiem, a symphonic work about human destiny in the face of disaster, a piece people only understood later. Robin wasn't writing about the Titanic. He was writing about himself. He appeared at charity events, public functions, smiling a thin, fragile smile fans recognized. The smile of a man afraid that if he stopped smiling, his body might shut down. Every time Robin stood before the public, he looked like someone sprinting toward a finish line whose location he already knew. Perhaps he wasn't trying to avoid the end, only to let the music reach it first. At this stage, Robin was no longer fighting fame or sorrow. He was fighting time, and once again, he did it in silence. The surgeries, the stabbing pains like knives twisting inside him, the close calls that seemed to break the family curse, those were only the overture to the final act. Robin entered 2011 with a vague sense that his body was hiding a secret far crueler than any sorrow he had ever sung. The familiar abdominal pain returned, not as fate knocking, but as a verdict. Tests revealed colon cancer that had already spread to his liver. Those cold, clinical words didn't just freeze the hospital room. They froze an entire journey. He once believed he could outpace with music. From that moment, Robin began a battle the audience would never hear turned into song. Chemotherapy, exhaustion, constant hospitalizations. The family kept quiet at first, while Robin, in one last attempt not to turn himself into a tragedy, appeared before the press with a thin smile and a body that no longer resembled the man who once rewrote pop history. He never spoke of illness, only of unfinished ideas, ongoing projects, melodies yet unnamed, as if stopping would mean surrender. By late 2011 and early 2012, the hospital became a stage with no applause. Colitis, pneumonia, and recurring infections drained him. At one point, he slipped into a coma. Doctors had little hope. Yet Robin, the same man who had once defied the expectations of the music industry, suddenly woke up. The media called it a miracle. Fans believed he would return. But that moment of clarity was nothing more than the last spotlight flickering before going out. Robin's body no longer had the strength for a second comeback. On May 20th, 2012, Robin Gibb drew his final breath at age 62, surrounded by the steady beeping of monitors and the hands of his family holding on to him. Dwina stayed at his side until the end. RJ bowed his head by the bed. Silence stretched across the room as if waiting for Robin to sing the last line of his life. But there was nothing left to sing. The trembling voice that defined a generation fell quiet forever. News of his death shocked the world, but what surfaced afterward chilled people even more. Medical files revealed Robin had been born with the same intestinal abnormality as Maurice. The blockage in 2010 wasn't an accident. It was part of a genetic chain stretching across decades. The truth uncovered after Robin's death made the Gibb family appear trapped inside a distorted mirror, where each painful memory reflected another. Maurice had collapsed suddenly from intestinal blockage that led to cardiac arrest. A fall no one understood until it was too late. Andy, too young to withstand the pressures of fame and the frailty in his heart and gut, spiraled into addiction and died before turning 30. When Robin's turn came, the chronic abdominal pain, the life-saving surgery in 2010, and the final sweep of cancer were merely pieces of a puzzle confirming what everyone had refused to see. They did not die from music or fame. They died from something programmed into their bodies, a biological time bomb ticking from the day they were born. The three voices that once fused into a harmony powerful enough to make the world stop and listen shared the same hidden fault line. No gunfire, no scandal, no power struggle ever destroyed the Bee Gees. It was fate wired into their flesh that removed them one by one from the stage. The chill did not come from their deaths themselves, but from the realization that each death was a variation of the same story, repeating until there was no voice left to continue it. A family that once made the world kneel before the power of three-part harmony was ultimately undone by something buried in their own DNA, a design flaw no one detected in time. To the public, this was no longer a music tragedy. It was destiny's final twist, as if Robin's entire life had been an extended version of "I started a joke." The world thought it was hearing a tale about fame, but it was actually the autobiography of a man born into an ending he could never escape. Robin didn't lose to cancer. He lost to the genetic script written inside him before he ever sang a note. And in that brutal paradox, he left behind a final chapter with no crescendo, only a truth that lingers like a shiver. Sometimes, what kills a legend isn't time. It's the very body that helped create immortal music. The legacy of Robin Gibb does not lie in the number of hits he helped create, even though that alone would be enough for any other artist to look up in awe. It lies in how his music changed the way the world perceives sadness, turning something once seen as weakness into an aesthetic substance capable of making an entire stadium fall silent with just a single trembling note. If Barry brought pop's explosive power, if Maurice provided the adhesive of harmony, then Robin was the soul that made listeners understand that even the most energetic melodies could carry a broken heart. The Bee Gees sold more than 220 million records, on par with the Beatles, Elvis, and Michael Jackson in terms of global impact. But Robin was not merely part of an empire. He defined a method, a new reference system for pop disco that infused interiority into dance music. Before the Bee Gees, disco was only rhythm. After them, it became narrative. Stayin' Alive was not simply the sound of the 1970s. It was the breath of a generation struggling to remain standing amid crisis. How Deep Is Your Love was not a sweet love song. It was the confession of a soul afraid of love, yet unable to stop seeking salvation. What few people realize is that Robin was the emotional architect of the Bee Gees. He constructed the layers of harmony that turned Barry's falsetto into a cultural weapon. He shaped the hazy mid-tones where listeners could not tell whether they were happy or on the verge of crying. Many artists who came later, from Justin Timberlake to The Weeknd, from Mika to Bruno Mars, have continued to explore the formula the Bee Gees left behind. Melodies that make the body move, but make the heart falter for a beat. Robin also proved something almost unimaginable in pop history: that music could be the map of a human life. What he wrote and sang stretched from the inner panic of youth, "I started a joke," to the existential anxiety of adulthood, "Run to me," and ended with the sacred resonance of Titanic Requiem, a work no longer belonging to the market, but to human memory. Few pop artists dare to leave commercial orbit for the realm of the symphonic. Robin did so driven by his obsession with time and death. His legacy is not just chart rankings, because charts change every week, not just the sound of disco, because trends always fade. Robin Gibb's legacy lies in making sadness something people want to hear, not something they want to flee from. Today, whenever a pop song is sad, without being miserable, whenever an artist blends light and shadow within a single note, they are walking the path Robin laid. On nights when people still play Stayin' Alive at the gym, in clubs, or in nostalgic playlists, they are not merely dancing, they are keeping alive the voice of a man who feared disappearing into silence. Robin Gibb left just as he appeared in music, quietly, without ostentation, yet leaving behind a void no one can fill. He was not the loudest voice, nor the one standing at center stage, but he was the one whose depth prevented the Bee Gees from becoming a band of just one era, but of many generations. If music is the proof of a person's existence, then Robin left the most complete dossier, a life constantly searching for meaning between glory and pain, between the applause of the world and the emptiness within himself. He proved that an artist does not need to be immortal to create something immortal. They only need the courage to be honest to the very end. Have you ever listened to a Bee Gees song and wondered why you were smiling and on the verge of tears at the same time? That is not your fault. That is Robin, still whispering somewhere that sadness is not a full stop. It is a reminder that we once lived. If you could say one thing to Robin Gibb during the days he was battling cancer, after everything he gave the world with that trembling voice, what would you want him to hear? Leave your comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because there are many more stories waiting to be told before the memories of a generation disappear into silence.